It's the Innovation Podcast with Mark Reed Edwards and Garnett Harriman. Let's start the show.
Hi, it's Mark, and I've got Garnett here. How you doing, Garnett?
Hey, Mark. How you doing?
Doing pretty well. I'm excited we have Bruno Aguiar of ESL with us to discuss esports, something that we've talked about a little bit before. And Garnett, I know this is an interview you've been looking forward to, so I'll let you take it away.
Super excited.
Hi, guys. Thanks for inviting.
Thanks for being here, Bruno. So, Bruno, you have an interesting background in both big data and marketing. Can you just tell us a little bit more about your career path, and then maybe we'll pick up with esports in general and the illustrious history of Turtle and ESL. What's your background?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay. So, I would say that I'm a marketeer. The big data kind of side of it really came on a bit later, because nowadays that's kind of essential for the marketing job. But I'm a marketing executive. I started my career in advertising, actually, back in Portugal. And so the first years of my career was all about marketing communication and, really kind of creating fun concepts and driving everything that is related with the brand communication. So then later on, I kind of moved more to the commercial side. So I became kind of more interested on the commercial side, not just purely communication. And so I decided to go abroad, and I did an MBA in Rotterdam School of Management. And after that, with my MBA, I joined a kind of a fast-growing company at the time called TomTom, satellite navigation.
Yep.
At the time when it was not on every single phone, so that was something kind of advanced from a technology point of view, and it was really
cutting edge.
Cutting edge. It was really, really, really interesting, because I would say even nowadays it's improving a lot, but in a completely different logic.
Sure.
But so it was a very interesting experience. And then I worked again a bit in advertising, this time in London. So I moved again for another country, all in Europe, but another country, where I really kind of dig deep on everything that was the online experience of advertising. So we were kind of starting with everything that is related with like apps and all the software on the phones, and then the use of email campaign and website, and having everything integrated. And I work for really interesting clients like British Airways and British Telecom. And then I moved to Germany for Vodafone, where I've worked 9 years, all in marketing functions pretty much, going from kind of a brand manager all the way to kind of head of propositions, with some experience in the middle when it comes to transformation and digital integration, which kind of maybe that was the intro to my kind of big data knowledge and how I got really interested with that.
Sure.
And finally, to Vodafone, I decided to do something completely different and join ESL. Really interesting market, really interesting industry. I was personally interested. I had friends already in the industry. And I decided to move away from telecoms and join esports and media in general. So that's kind of like my story, and that's my experience.
And I think part of the reason we're excited to have you here, we'll pick this thread up later on in the list of questions, is I think that your career, as it aligns with this moment in time, with the development of esports and what's happening, is very much a microcosm of some of the things that we see happening in the market in general. And we'll pick that up later.
Sure.
But basically around marketing and branding. And so,
okay,
the provenance of this particular podcast owes a debt to what Mark has done with his previous podcast, which is called Confessions of a Marketer. And so it's great that you have that. Great that you have that perspective, and that this is such an exciting time from a marketing and brand development standpoint within esports in general.
Oh, totally.
So with that said, let's take a step back and try to set the stage for some of our listeners who are not esports experts or practitioners. What's the difference between esports versus real sports?
Well, that's a very good question. So, in a nutshell, we don't really see a difference. That's a reality. So we see esports as a real sport, and that's because we have a real competitive environment. There are rules and regulations in place. It kind of requires a mental and motoric abilities from the top level players. I mean, we get to a point where we have millions of viewers, we have full stadiums with fans cheering for their favorite teams. So all of that is, it's like real sports. Now, obviously, that it's, I would say, less physical than what people usually think when they think of sports. But I mean, if you consider darts and chess and golf sports, then there's no reason why esports is not a sport. So, or a real sport, let's put it that way. And I think that we already seeing some countries are accepting esports as a real sport. France, Korea, Russia, Canada, also here in Germany. So I think it's just a matter of time until these perceptions is change and people accept esports as a real sport.
So I believe, I don't know if you know this, Bruno, but
Yeah.
Mark has a compound of land, and
Stop it.
He's declared it a sovereign state, and I think the sovereign state of Mark Reed Edwards has already accepted esports as a legitimate pro sport.
I'm happy to hear that.
That not being the case, nonetheless, I do have a son who plays a lot of esports, and I tell you, when he does a race over the course of an afternoon, he is wiped out like he did a real one. So the racing is very similar, apart from taking the G's that you get when you're actually out in a car, is very comparable, I think, to the real thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, okay, and when you talk about racing, there's an actual world comparison, and when you talk about FIFA, there's football, all that. But on top of that, there are a bunch of other games which don't have like a real world comparison, such as Dota 2 or CS:GO. And those games, I mean, the skills required to be a top player in those games are unbelievable. I mean, it really requires training. Right. It requires a mental capacity, just concentration levels, all of that. And I mean, nowadays the top players, they really follow the same logic of what you would consider a sportsman. So in terms of caring their nutrition, their mental health, training, all. So they are sports people basically.
And in fact, a really good F1 driver uses a simulator quite a bit too. So,
oh yeah,
so they kind of dabble in the esports world as well.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, the development of the technology and the way the technology is allowing us to, specifically for those games, to be so close to the real thing, really pushes anyone that is playing those games to a level that is almost like the real thing. But again, I would say there's all the other games also. They really require to be a top player. You really need to be at the top of your level on every aspect.
Yeah.
And so it's not that you're comparing esports to real sport. It sounds like that's sort of a foregone conclusion. I mean, really, what I think what this question might be about is esports versus real pro sports and pro sports leagues and that sort of stuff. And if that's a reasonable clarification, then there's some other points of comparison that might be interesting to unpack a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, definitely, if you consider actually how esports is becoming professionalized, and I mean, just looking at the prize money of the events and the infrastructure that the teams have, I would say, yeah, it's very much on par with other pro sports, definitely.
Well, let's look at this one thing that I'm sort of intellectually fascinated by. So nobody would ever challenge that, basketball or football or even, let's just say, esports. Right? There's some physical and definitely either more or less mental skill involved. Right. So that's not even worth challenging, really, right? But what I'm curious about is the entertainment value and like the sort of treating the sports spectacle as entertainment and using the pro sports league concept to sort of create and disseminate the entertainment. I mean, fundamentally, esports are doing the same thing, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, okay, let's put it this way. So entertainment really depends on the eye of the beholder in terms of what gets you going. What do you like? What are your interests and all that kind of what is your
sure.
Whether you fit in. And what we see is that nowadays, for the millennials and like the younger crowd, like I would say below 45 generation, I mean, we're talking about digital natives. We're talking about people who grew up with internet, being online. And so for those, the games are really the number one entertainment. It's not the TV show, cinema.
That's exactly what I think that's
So for
exactly
those guys,
accurate. Yep.
yeah, that's and so when you get to the point where you play the game and you are involved, I mean, the same way that I also played football with my friends outside, and so I can recognize the skills of Ronaldo or Messi. When I play the games, I also kind of learn enough to understand the challenges of the game and to appreciate how the top players are playing the same game that I can play. And so the entertainment will come from that understanding. And so, yeah, that's why it's normal that kind of digital natives less than 45 years old, for example, are really see that as with an entertainment value that for an older generation, probably they don't get. They just, why is this fun to watch? Let's put it that way, which I get. If you don't play it, it's harder to understand the required and follow the storyline.
And another aspect that you threw out earlier, I would like to unpack a little bit because I've seen some funny data points around it, is this whole notion of training and infrastructure and that sort of thing. So I have a colleague who is a senior executive at VMware, which is owned by Dell, and Dell also owns Alienware, and Alienware is a big thing in your world in esports.
Yeah.
And so I learned very recently and have a standing invite to go visit. Alienware has its own top secret training camp for the teams that they sponsor, and their training camp is in Santa Monica. And Santa Monica is a beautiful. By the way, Mark, it's literally like 5 blocks from James's office, from the office.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So Santa Monica, if you've never been there, Bruno, is sunny and like lovely and beachy and surf culture and all. It's very outdoorsy, and there's this building where the Alienware training camp is, and it's it's dark and it's just filled with machines, and like the only thing that's not like a gaming console or some other thing, it's literally the cafeteria. And by the way, I literally had to get security clearance to get the approval to go see this thing.
Yeah, no, I have to say I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised because now because now that the reality is, that is not a unique case. There are a lot of teams which are extremely professionalized to that extent. These guys, they really need to practice like 8 hours a day. They need to develop like game strategies. They have coaches. They have nutrition side. So it's really a team. The same way that the football team will go and practice every day, and then they play on foot. And by the way, sorry, I'm European football, soccer. So
no, that's okay.
They go and practice every day, and then they play on Sundays. But it's the same thing with these players. They have to practice every day, and yeah, it's that professional.
So the other thing I want to unpack a little bit, and I think this maybe we'll pick this next piece up later at the very end. Mark always wants to know about the future of anything that we're and what your predictions are. I think it's going to come up again later. Okay. But I'm continuing down this comparison with pro sports leagues, right? Mm-hmm. So what about betting? Is betting a thing for esports? Is it even legal? What's the state of betting in esports?
Yeah, well, betting is a thing as in because of the size of esports, it's becoming, or it gathered more interest. But we're actually ESL. We're pretty much a leader in the industry, and of course, and as part of being a leader in the industry, we aim to be as well a force for integrity. We're with founding members of something called ESIC, which is kind of a coalition for anti-doping, anti-corruption, anti-match fixing. And so betting is something that we take seriously. There is still a bit of a lack of regulation, not much from an esports perspective, but from a country perspective. So the reality is, contrary to other championships, the esports because it's a digital environment. We don't have borders the same way that other sports have. So in that sense, there is some gaps when it comes to being in compliance with all the laws of different countries. We have if we have ESL 1 in New York, and then we have an ESL 1 in Cologne, and then we have an ESL 1 in Mumbai, and then, so there's all these places, all these different countries around the world, and with each one of them with their kind of unique set of laws that we need to comply when it comes to betting. So it's still kind of it's a turvy picture, because we're trying to create that organization that kind of regulates from a kind of a worldwide perspective, but we're not there yet.
All right, we have 2 more episodes with Bruno coming up. Next time, we're back with part 2 of our chat as we explore more about betting and esports, the background of ESL, the key innovations in ESL, and how brands are seeing the value of esports. That's next time. In a couple of weeks, we talk more about the esports landscape, the future investments that ESL is making, data, of course, and lots more. So stay tuned.
Thanks for joining Garnett and Mark on the Innovation Podcast. Visit innovationpodcast.co to subscribe and listen to other episodes.